Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about human emotion and the way we navigate this life of trials and triggers and treasures with the help of astrology and tarot. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, and an Akashic Records reader, and I'm here to help you do this messy life with as much grace, ease, and pleasure as possible. Hello, welcome to day 10 of the 22 Days of Tarot. We're on card 9, the Hermit, today, and I'm recording early. It's like 11:50 a.m. The past few nights I've been recording at the end of the day, which was kind of cool because I had like a whole day's worth of insight to share, but then I found myself getting a little bit lost and like tired at the end of the day, and my mind wasn't sharp, and so new phase. We're hermiting, and that means that I kind of need to be in a space of concentration and focus and presence and quiet. And it's just a little bit easier for me to do that shortly after I do my little morning practice. So today, the Hermit. I love this card. I have long loved this card, and I especially love the visual on the portals card, which is a forest, and you're surrounded by trees, and then there's this little like path that is laid down through these trees, and then you see a portal that enters like a new part of the forest. It's the same forest, but it's kind of misty and foggy on the other side of this portal. And then there's wild grass that's growing all over the place as opposed to this like neat path. And before the portal, when you're just walking through this forested space, there are all these little lights everywhere. Like it kind of looks like there are twinkle lights in the trees and on the ground. But then when you look through this doorway, there are no lights like that spread all over the place, but there is one larger light that's at the very end of this grassy walkway. And to me, for the first time, it kind of hit me that it feels like that's soul. And it feels like before you cross through that doorway, you're sort of in this scattered space, similar to how I was just describing at the end of the night. I'm scattered. There's a lot on my mind. I've processed a lot, I've talked a lot, I've worked a lot, and I haven't quite had that focus point to go back to gather myself and to really like sit and feel into the messages that are coming through. And it's interesting because I used to be such a night owl, and then over the past stretch of time, I've gotten back into rising early and generally going to sleep a little bit earlier, though I could work on it. And it's beautiful, and it feels really delicious to sit in silence in the morning and to experience the world before a lot of people wake up. And that feels very hermity to me. As a 12th house sun and Mercury, I really thrive in having places of solitude like that. And it's where I feel like I can kind of access my light. And so the visual on this card is really beautiful and really, really captures that. This immersion into the wildness of nature that you access on the other side of this more manicured path. And this more manicured path feels like the way that we go through life, with parts of ourselves sort of scattered all over like these lights. And that's beautiful. And there's, that's life. But there are also these periods where we cross through that threshold and we re-enter the wildness. And sometimes people go on actual journeys into the wilderness to experience that level of connection and that level of presence and quiet and solitude. And there's a sort of language that you can access when you're alone in nature with no other humans around that can be incredibly nourishing and revealing. And there's a sort of consciousness that we can tap into when we have that quiet and that space to kind of get back into the rhythm and the feel of the unseen and the felt and the seen. And it's so it's a gorgeous card. And the other piece that kind of occurred to me as I was looking at this is that one part of my work is that I lead a lot of journeys. Like I'll do new moon circles. Those are coming to an end, but I'll be starting planetary labs this coming month, an Aries season starting with Mars, where we work really deeply with one planet and go on a journey to connect with that planet as a deity, as an energy, as an archetype, and to work with that planet within our own chart and to build a deeper relationship with it and a real connection, like a reciprocal connection. And whenever I'm leading people on journeys, I almost always bring them to a threshold or a doorway in the forest as a place to access that inner space and to kind of step into a parallel universe of sorts. And that didn't occur to me until today, looking at this card, that this is very much like that doorway that leads us into that other world, that leads us into that space of possibility and introspection and imagination. And the Hermit is very much that vibe. And our prompt today was, what was our prompt today? I'm already forgetting. Hold, please. Our prompt today was, how are you evolving? And before I looked at the imagery of the card, while I was just sitting with the prompt and holding the card upside down in my hand, I saw a really tall beanstalk, and then I saw trees and I saw roots, and I heard you're putting down roots and you're becoming sturdy. And that really tracks. Like, I'm coming off several years that required a lot of resilience and kind of determination and consistency. And I feel like during that time, although I was moving all over the country, like 6 states in 6 years, really a lot of moving and change and like big life disruptions and breakdowns and all sorts of stuff. I feel like throughout that whole time, I was really putting down roots within myself and cultivating this strong center and this self-awareness that's really coming to serve me now. And now that I have a place that I've landed that I actually really, really love and hope to stay in, I would love to actually put down more like roots in the typical sense, like stay somewhere. And so seeing this forest and these trees and experiencing the presence and not permanence, but like the sturdiness and the durability and the resilience of this forest was really special. And it also reminds me of the roots that I've been putting down with the work that I've been doing and evolving. Speaking of the question, how am I evolving? Evolving into someone who can hold space for that kind of work for other people too. And that's incredibly fulfilling and honestly, like, deeply humbling to be able to do that. It's some of the most powerful shit I've witnessed in my life, and it's really incredible. Like, anyway, I could talk about it for a long time, but I'm really blown away by being able to watch people go through their own journeys and their own experiences, and to be a facilitator of that process feels like such a gift and is such a gift. And the other piece of this that came through before I even sat down for my practice is around boundaries, and how the Hermit, although I wouldn't typically think of them this way, the Hermit is necessarily boundaried. You think about like a monk or someone who takes like a vow of silence, or someone who retreats from the world to some degree, and how that in itself is boundaried, and they're having to set quite clear boundaries in order to maintain their devotion, whatever that devotion looks like. And often folks who offer various types of healing work have to have really strong boundaries in order to do that, and in order to kind of hold space for other people. And it's something I was thinking about because I was writing about my Mercury-Pluto opposition last night, or not specifically about mine, but it was inspired by thinking about my Mercury-Pluto opposition, which I spoke about on yesterday's podcast episode, and the sort of like obsessive, like probing quality that my mind can have, and how that can be difficult at times. And it got me thinking about the rest of my like challenging Pluto aspects, of which there are many, and how that often involves like really intense relationships and really intense experiences with other people, where all unconsciously provoke something within them, and that will lead to a lot of like complex feelings and a lot of stuff that comes up that can lead to conflict and obsessive feelings and all kinds of stuff. And how that's beautiful in many ways because it can be this sort of alchemical process. And I've experienced that from other people who have similar aspects too, where I've felt triggered by them or I've felt put off by them in some way or really attracted to them and have needed to kind of explore like what is going on here? What is this all about? And we can like intellectualize it all we want through the lens of astrology, but there is something really magical about when two souls come together and ignite each other in a particular way that lends to their personal evolution and their shared evolution. Often those relationships end up falling away from each other, and that's okay too, and that's part of the process of life. But sometimes they don't, and sometimes people can kind of reinforce each other's power and help each other to continue to shed and evolve. And anyway, so I was thinking about that because I was thinking about various relationships and like how my chart interacts with people within my age group, especially like 5 or so years above and below me. Because people with that in that age range would have their Pluto very close to my Pluto. And so that would activate all of my other fixed placements as a Pluto and Scorpio person who has a lot of fixed stuff going on in a fixed Grand Cross. So I was thinking about like this concept of projection and how often we can trigger each other and then experience fear when we feel triggered by someone and then lash out at them or place a lot of blame on them or vilify them or kind of project our own power onto them and idealize them and kind of go all or nothing, like they're the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. And we might put people on pedestals. And then I always am leery of being on a pedestal because the only way off a pedestal is down, and it tends to be a sharp drop. And that's something that I think the Hermit is very aware of, coming off of the experience of strength. Strength, Leo, the Hermit, Virgo. There's this evolution from the self-focus of Leo, like coming into my courage, coming into my strength and my heartfulness, my heart-centeredness, identifying my desires and working with them and choosing to kind of like maybe tame a part of myself. But then the Hermit's like, we can be wild, but we have to kind of immerse ourselves in the otherness of it all in order to be wild without being an egomaniac. And like returning to nature and returning to the forest, returning to the portal and stepping through it, going across the threshold and spending time in silence is a way to reclaim that. And it feels really appropriate that this morning when I was at my altar before my tarot practice, I had this instinct that came up. I had asked a question. I was doing some devotional work with Mars because it's Mars Day. And I was asking like about a desire, and they said I had to perform a cord cutting. And they showed me this person who I actually mentioned on the podcast, I think a couple days ago. This was someone I knew from Portland who was like a drummer who was part of the ayahuasca circle that I did. And I remembered like a very intense thing that happened in 2 of the 2 circles that I did, both of them, where I had this like really strong vision about him. And it felt like there was this deep soul contract of sorts between us, but it was really intense and very confusing because I hardly knew him at this point. But one of his parents was leading the ceremony, the first one, and he wasn't even there. And I'd only met him once, and it was fleeting. But for some reason, his energy came through in that ceremony, and I had like a whole crazy ass vision that we were like getting soul married. And it was very, very, very confusing. And if you listened to that episode, you'll know that I was like in a very weird place for a long time after that ceremony. And I'd gone in trying to like cut cords with my dad and to kind of free myself from that energy. And then interestingly, I came out feeling very connected to this person who I hardly knew. And, it eventually like faded and I moved on, and I was like, I went down like a really bad like twin flame rabbit hole for a while. Thank God I didn't get stuck there. But I also ended up in a relationship with someone else. And so it was just like, it went to the back of my mind. But we had this connection because he had like he's like an herbalist and he had like supported me in some ways. And so there was like this lingering connection that didn't go away completely for a little bit. And I never thought about it again and thought to actually perform a cord cutting with this person. Because even if like he had no consciousness of what went down during that ceremony or during the second one, there was still something that was triggered there. Like these things, although they may appear imaginary or we're in this like hallucinatory state and something happens, it's still real because it's happening within us. So his consciousness doesn't really matter. What did matter is that this morning, arriving at my altar, I had this very strong and sudden insight that I needed to cut that cord and to remove it because there was something that was still kind of stuck within me. And so I ended up doing this impromptu cord removal process, and it felt really good and was really relieving. And then I was able, from setting that boundary and from clearing out that energy, to come to my divination altar and to sit down and to really engage with the practice in a different way. And I felt very free. And the hermit is an energy like seeking wildness, seeking freedom on the other side of this portal, stepping back into the forest, stepping back into wildness. So it all felt very like alive within me. And I was so grateful that I was able to tune in that moment and really hear that message and not just cast it away and be like, what are you talking about? When I was like losing it in 2020 and like thought I was getting soul married to some stranger human. Because it was embarrassing, right? Like I don't even think I told many people about it because I was like, I don't really know how to articulate this without sounding like I've really gone off the deep end. And so I just didn't really share it with people, and certainly not him and not like his mom. And it was weird. So anyway, that felt really good to do that. And then sitting down here, I was able to look at this card really anew. And I totally forgot what the imagery on the card was until I saw it. But again, like before looking at the card, I saw beanstalks and then I saw trees and I saw like a trunk. And then to see this beautiful path surrounded by trees was really special. And it brought me back to a friend, really dear friend of mine and a couple who got married in Northern California in the forest. And it was my favorite wedding I've ever been to. I felt, I guess I'm a big crier. I cry. I cry a lot. And I cry at weddings. I cry at funerals. I cry at all the things. And I really was so touched by their vows at this wedding. It was one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever been a part of. And hearing the way that they expressed their love for each other was so open and honest and tender and meaningful. And these are two people that I just adore so, so much. And I felt just this like huge, incredible sense of joy and love. And to be able to kind of like be a part of people's love for a moment can be an immersive experience, very similar to, interestingly, going off into the forest and immersing yourself in the trees, because that is love too. That's the language of love. And in a way, that's all kind of the same. And the fact that they took us into the forest to experience their love in that way was so magical. And so it reminds me too of like the path that we walked down when we were entering the forest to go find this spot where we were about to watch them tie the knot. And how that, like, love itself can be this rewilding experience that can be so scary, right? So scary. And I had kind of a whole like little heart journey with this last night where I was feeling this like battle within myself of wanting to like really open up to love and wanting to like really fall in love. I distinctly felt this tug of war between my mind and my heart. And this part of me that was so ready to like open up. And then I felt this fear rise up within me, and this protective fear that was like, it's really not safe to do that. You know, it's not safe to do that. you know how this goes, like pull in all of the stories of the heartbreaks and the pain and like da 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 da. And then this other part of me that felt very wise that was like, okay, and like that's life. And part of my commitment to myself as a person has been like consistently doing the scary heart thing and consistently trying to kind of break through that wall that keeps me caged in and that keeps me in a state of disconnection. Whew. And so, like, a lot of stuff was coming up, and it was just such a gorgeous way to feel that transition from heart centered Leo strength, the courage of the heart, literally cœur in French, the heart, and then moving into Virgo Hermit requires boundaries and discernment, but still wants to enter the wild, still wants to experience the wild and the truth and the wisdom of both the heart and the sort of like immersive, expansive feeling of love. Whether you're walking into a forest by yourself and looking at the light, or like going to a ceremony, or going on a visual journey with yourself, or falling in love, and how all of those are journeys and they're initiations in their own way. Speaking of yesterday's oracle, like the experience of falling in love is a journey, a big ass journey, one of the most potent ones and one of the scariest ones for me at least. And it can feel like so activating and terrifying that it brings in all of those defense mechanisms within you that want to shut it off and want to explain it away and want to intellectualize it and want to like find reasons to poke holes in it and set it on fire and sabotage it and all of that stuff. And it got me thinking about All About Love by Bell Hooks. And there's this chapter where she's talking about how the act of like the term falling in love really kind of misleads us, that we make a choice to love and that we don't have to make that choice, and that choice, love in itself, is a verb that we act upon. And I have mixed feelings about that because I feel like I at once like recognize that like there's usually this moment of choice, right, where you can be like, I could step away from this right now, I could shut myself off right now, I could say no right now, or I could step forward, I could step toward it, I could step into feeling. And I think that choice probably exists for most of us, whether it's conscious or not. And so when people do say like they just fell in love and they couldn't help it, maybe that's true. And maybe they're just not conscious of that pause where they kind of chose to enter the doorway. They chose to step across the threshold and set off on that journey. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Only you can know that for yourself, and only I can know that for myself, the way that I experience love and life. But I know that today I feel like I want to step across the threshold. My oracle card was protection, and I want to just read the mantra to you guys today. I'm not going to, actually, it's a short passage. Let me just read the whole thing to you. And then I will share the song of the day, which I've been forgetting to do lately. Although I have been dropping the video, the YouTube links in the show notes for every single episode. So even if I don't mention a song of the day, know that there's always a song of the day. And usually a whole music video that has like extra oracular insights if you really want to lean into it. So that's how I work with it. I love to do shufflemancy every day and to get a song of the day, and sometimes bibliomancy, and definitely an oracle card every day. Anyway, let's look at protection. The best lightning rod for your protection is your own spine. Ralph Waldo Emerson, from Lectures and Biographical Sketches. Whenever you're feeling vulnerable to negativity, it's important to seek protection. You can do so through meditation, praying to your angels, guides, and ancestors. Protection also requires you to look internally, Hermit, and connect with your intuition, Hermit. Begin trusting, observing, and listening to the voice inside. Call in whatever spiritual forces that align with your beliefs and remain diligent in your efforts toward peaceful resolve. Sometimes the difficulties you face can be great teachers, yet other times you may be facing an energetic blockage. It's important to recognize the difference so you understand when to have grace through conflict and when to pick up your metaphysical sword and armor. The mantra is, I am protected by forces of love and light, and in this protection, I'm able to discern what is actually mine and what isn't my fight. And I think you could easily swap in projection, and I think maybe that's even its own card in here. No, it's not. It's just protection. You could easily swap in projection with that last line. I am able to discern what is actually mine and what isn't my fight. Like, there's a level of projection there where, again, coming back to the Pluto stuff, especially if we have hard Pluto aspects in our natal charts, we're likely to get activated by people and for us to activate people all the time in a pretty pronounced way. And it's really important to do regular energetic cleansing to ground yourself, especially if you have 12th house placements too, which can be a house, or like Pisces placements, strong Neptune, like all of those signatures can really lend to people projecting a lot of shit onto you. And that can become really tiresome and confusing and disorienting and make for really messy connections that feel like you kind of got tendrils everywhere and like your little octopus who's like in everybody's shit. And as someone myself who's like quite sensitive and has like all of the above, all of those signatures, having a daily rooting practice, grounding practice where I do a visual cleansing and a smoke cleansing and like sound cleansing and water I do like the whole thing. I do it all. And it's essential for me. And my well-being vastly improved when I started doing that on a regular basis. And that brings me back to Virgo and back to the Hermit. Virgo often has to do with cleansing the spirit. And I did that cord cutting and like all of that. Those are ways that we love on ourselves so that we can open up to love. You don't go into the forest because you want to stay there isolated for the rest of your life. At least most people don't. You go in there because you want to find a part of yourself again that you can bring back into the light with you and bring back into love with you. And so these periods of solitude are not meant to last forever. We are social creatures, and I for a long time kind of kept myself in hiding. Like really since my last breakup, I've hardly dated. I've gone on like 2 dates in like 2 years. It's not been 2 years, almost 2 years. Not even almost. It's been like a year and a half. I've been celibate for a year and a half, which has been really great actually, but it's getting tiresome and I don't want it to last that much longer. But it's been cleansing. It's been really, really, really cleansing and restorative. And it's helped me to find the bits and pieces of myself that were like those scattered lights in the forest and to cross through that threshold and to find that light at the very end and to reclaim that part of myself so I can come back out feeling more whole and feeling more myself and ready to connect with people on a deeper level than I was before. So I'm deeply grateful for that. And also it's a reminder to not get stuck there, to not spend so much time out in the forest that you lose contact with other forms of love and with connection. My song of the day was Moon Song by Phoebe Bridgers. And Moon Song is really lovely. I'm going to pull up the lyrics and read a little bit for you. You asked to walk me home, but I had to carry you, and you pushed me in, and now my feet can't touch the bottom of you. You couldn't have stuck your tongue down the throat of somebody who loves you more. So I will wait for the next time you want me, like a dog with a bird at your door. We hate Tears in Heaven, but it's sad that his baby died, and we fought about John Lennon until I cried. And then we went to bed upset, but now I'm dreaming, and you're singing at my birthday. I've never seen you smiling so big. It's nautical themed, and there's something I'm supposed to say, but can't for the life of me remember what it is. And if I could give you the moon, I would give you the moon. You are sick, and you're married, and you might be dying, but you're holding me like water in your hands. When you saw the dead little bird, you started crying, but you know the killer doesn't understand. I'm just really drawn to the sort of devotional nature of this song and how Virgo can be a very devotional sign, and the Hermit is very devotional. But again, there's this sort of boundary that's necessary. Like, this person is Phoebe, who's singing, Phoebe Bridgers, the songwriter. Like, there's this feeling of intense desire and love for someone that verges into self-abandonment. And that's part of why prioritizing our space and our time and our boundaries is so important through the process of connecting with other people. And that's not to say, like, I'm not a fan of falling into, like, those obsessive early stages of love, which can be so magical and incredible. And, like, yeah, there's nothing like it. But it's also this balance that we have to strike between protecting ourselves and caring for ourselves and maintaining our selfhood through the process of connecting with other people. So you're holding me like water in your hands. I included the lyrical video in the notes if you want to go experience the lyrics and listen to the song. And otherwise, I will be back tomorrow and I will talk to you then. Bye, y'all.